During that time, I wasn't making a lot of money. I didn't have any work. Being at home with no sense of purpose, I feel like I'm just wasting away. Like I feel like I'm a burden on my wife. A lot of times, God speaks to us through our spouses, and so I told her I was like, I would be willing. I don't know what it looks like. I'm not going to be any good at it, but I do feel like if this is something you really want to do, I will be right there with you. So I went from 6 months ago, no job, no college prospects, no kids, to now all of a sudden trying to go into accounting, and now I have two kids. We didn't have anything that we really could do except for show up and pray. Every night, our girl will pray for baby brother to come home. In January of 2021, we were able to adopt our girls, and then 2 months later, our son's process was finished too, and we legally adopted him as well. I got a full-time offer. I suddenly am like earning a salary, and I have medical benefits for the first time in my life. I believe that God equips us for the things that he calls us for. So any good work he starts, he will complete. It may not look like the world's idea of success, but he's going to make sure that you're cared for throughout the entire process. My name is Jordan Case. I have a wife of almost 10 years. I grew up in church. My parents went to a church for a long time and were actually foundational in building a church that's still in my hometown. And I feel like that experience and growing up in that church was pivotal to my spiritual journey that I'm on today.
Can you share a time where God has revealed something in his word or in your heart that he wanted you to walk in obedience to?
Taking it back to 2017, my wife and I had just recently moved back to Wichita from California. And the entire time we were in California, which is about 4 years, I just felt unsettled. I never really liked being here. I never really felt at home. And I think it was a nudging. It manifested itself as bitterness, which was more me, a spiritual problem within me. But I feel like God was still nudging us back to Kansas for what he was calling us to. And so I was trying very hard to go into physical therapy. And so Wichita State had a good program, and I was gonna get into it. So that was part of why we moved back. And then the other part was my wife had just finished her degree, and so she was going to start interviewing for jobs. So when we made the plan to move back, my wife started, interviewing at different places, and we interviewed in Topeka and in Wichita. And even though Topeka paid better, and since it's the capital, it seemed like it had it had more proximity to Kansas City, it had more opportunities there, but we just didn't really feel like it was the right place for us. So we ended up in Wichita. And my wife is like a sign language interpreter, and so she ended up working at the school district, and she works with deaf and hard of hearing children. And she also works at a Title I school, which is just it's a low income neighborhood. There are a lot more social and familial problems than you would see at other types of schools. And one child in particular got put on her caseload, who was more problem than most. She would tear up the classroom when she was upset. She would argue. She would hit my wife. She would throw pencils at her, try to stab her. Just an overall violent child. But my wife would come home every day and say, like, sorry. Well, my wife would come home every day and say, I love her. Like, I don't know what it is. She's so awful, but I love her. And during that time, I was working a job in retail, but it required a lot of travel. So I was gone a lot. And I also I wasn't making a lot of money. So I had times where I was away for a long time, and there was times where I was home and I didn't have any work. So I was just being, at home. And I grew up on a farm, so I'm used to working constantly. and being at home with no sense of purpose, I'm struggling emotionally, financially, spiritually, because it's like I don't feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. I feel like I'm just wasting away. Like I feel like I'm a burden on my wife. I feel like, the plans that I'm striving for aren't working. Um, and I was going to apply for the physical therapy program at Wichita State. And that same year that we moved back, they actually changed their entry criteria to be performance based only. Like they removed the interview process. So then the only way you can get in is to have like a 5.0 GPA essentially. And so I was like, I'm an average, slightly above average student. Like I'm not going to get it. There's 30,000 applicants. They let in 30 people. I'm not going to get it. So again, I'm just aimless. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like I feel like a failure. I feel like, I can't get a break. And so I enroll in their Masters of their Masters of Exercise Science program because I'm like, well, maybe this will get me, I'll bolster my GPA. I'll do some extracurriculars. I'll get there. And I started doing that. I did the summer semester and then I enrolled for the fall semester. And as I'm going to school, I'm riding my bike to the first day of class, the in-person classes, and I don't feel right. And there's just this building like weight in my chest. And I which I later figured out was anxiety, but I'd never really had anxiety before. And I get all the way there and I walk up to the door and it's a automatic door and they open like this. And something inside me was like, I can't go in. So I got on my bike and I rode back home and I emailed my professor and was like, I'm going to drop this course. I'm sorry, I can't do it, which is very unlike me because at this point I have been going to college for 7-8 years and counting, trying to get all these degrees and certifications and stuff. And so I'm, just going down this path of like, I am going to get there. Because I had identified a long time ago, I was going to work in the medical field and I was going to be, affluent and powerful. And I, just all these things of like, I'm going to make the world a better place through medicine and all that stuff. And so I had this existential crisis yet again, because it was like, I'm doing this master's program. It doesn't feel like I'm going anywhere. It doesn't feel like this plan that I've laid out for my life is working out. And so I finished I think I had 2 online courses and I finished those out. I get A's, which, doesn't matter. And, I get to the end of the semester and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I was like, I have a job that I work 10, 15 weeks out of the year and no prospects. Like nobody will hire me with my resume because it's kind of blank at this point. And that Christmas, my wife and we traveled back to California to visit her family. And whenever we come to California to visit her family, it always feels like God is doing big shifts in our life. But this time specifically, I'm here and it's like we could barely afford to get here. And, I am dreading going back. So I'm like, I don't really have a job. I don't have, a college lined out. Like I don't have anything. My wife's killing it. Like she's got her interpreting job and she's, basically keeping us afloat. And it was during that time here where it was actually the night before we came back. My wife and I I don't even know how we got here, but we were just sitting in bed. And I was on the laptop and we pulled up the Kansas Adoption Network and we were going through, profiles of these children that were in need of homes, in need of being adopted. And we had a really serious discussion of like, do we see ourselves as these kinds of people, as the people that would take other people's kids into our house and, raise them as our own? And I feel like that was kind of the first nudge into what God was preparing for us. But I've never really seen myself as a dad. Like I I don't have that instinct in me. It just doesn't really come natural to me to like care for kids. I held my first baby when I was like 18, and it wasn't anything. Like it was fine, I guess. But I wasn't excited about it. I wasn't sitting there like, gosh, I wish I had like 5 of my own. I was just like, yeah, it's somebody else's baby. Here you go. And but like I said, I was like, my wife was, um, like, do you see us as a family that would do this? And my answer is always, I see myself as somebody who will step into God's will for my life. And a lot of times God's will comes to me through my wife. She always has a lot of um, good ideas. And a lot of times God speaks to us through our spouses. And so I told her, I was like, I would be willing. I don't know what it looks like. I'm not going to be any good at it, but I do feel like, if this is something you really want to do, I will be right there with you. I had no idea what it looked like because, it's not like going to the Humane Society and getting a dog. Like I've done that, and it's, you walk in, you give them a couple $100 and you walk out with a dog. So that was my experience up to that point. I was like, well, maybe that's what this is like. You just, add to cart on the Kansas Adoption Network and they ship you a kid. I don't know. And so it's definitely a lot more complicated than that. And then the next day, we were sitting at, I think it was Starbucks, like waiting for our plane, and my mother-in-law was there too, and she's actually an accountant. And I started talking to her. I was like, well, what does it look like to be an accountant? Because I was like, I'm randomly strongly considering it. Like I just been having these thoughts of like, what if I would do this instead of what I've been trying to do? So I talked to her about it, and the next day I went and enrolled at Friends University. They had like an accelerated program, and because I'd already had so many degrees, I had all my gen eds and everything. So I was like, I can get this done in 18 months and be an accountant, and I can hopefully have more job prospects than I do right now. So I enrolled at Friends University in their adult accounting program. So it was like nights and online. And so I started doing that. And at the same time, going back to this terror child that's on my wife's caseload, we were actually driving one day. I think it was in February or March of 2017 or 2018, sorry. And one of my friends, my wife's friends, calls her out of the blue. I still remember where we were when she called and was like, hey, I'm in this, I think it was a quilting class at the YMCA. Completely, I didn't even realize the YMCA offered this, but she was in this class and she was talking to this woman that was beside her, and come to find out that this woman was this child's social worker. And she said that their mom has caught, a lot of jail time, and she's looking at 3 to 5 years. Like she's going to be gone for a while. And she doesn't really have anywhere for these kids to go except foster care. And my wife hangs up the phone and she looks at me and she goes, so were you serious about what you told me back in December? She said, because we might be getting some kids. And I was like, if you think it's a good idea, I think it's a good idea. So yeah, sure. And I would say, 2-3 weeks later, my wife was eating lunch at work, and their mother, this girl's mother, texted her and was like, hey, the SWAT team is at my house. I need you to come get these kids. Like, and I should preface that just like this girl that was on my daughter's caseload, my wife had some sort of weird influence over her mother too, because her mother wasn't allowed on school premises because she threatened so many individuals at the school that she wasn't allowed to set foot on school property anymore. But my wife was able to connect with them and build a relationship with them. And so then when, the mother came to parent teacher conferences and was like, I have nowhere for my kids to go, I'm going to jail, Brooke was able to be like, well, I'll take them. Like I can take care of it while you're gone. And so fast forward, April 4th, 2018, my wife gets a text while she's eating lunch, and mom is like, hey, the SWAT team is at my door. They're coming to arrest me. Can you please come get my kids? Because her kids weren't at school that day. And so my wife goes and she talks to the police, and they're like, who are you? And she's like, well, I'm the kid's interpreter. And they say, well, you can't be here. Like, you're not a family member, you're not anything. And fun part about deaf and hard of hearing world is that they're legally required to have an interpreter, especially for police situations and that. So my wife was able to work that loophole and be like, hey, no, there's a deaf child in here. She needs to know what's going on. I need to be here. And so then police, break down the door. They go in the house. They arrest a bunch of people. And my wife goes in. There's these two girls just sitting on the stairs crying. Because, what else can you do? And she goes in there and she hugs them and consoles them, and she's bringing them out. And the police are trying to decide where these kids are going to go because they obviously can't stay there. And they have no, there's no father in the picture. There's no other family members that can take them. And their mother says, well, they're going with my wife. And the police say, well, no, they can't because, she has no legal right to them. They would have to go into foster care. And mother's like, well, I have a person that has power of attorney. He can come and take them, even though she had already, she wanted them to go with us and all that. So then that man shows up and he doesn't want them. They don't want to go with him. And so the police officers that were there basically said, our captain said that the kids need to go with this man. Just wait until he leaves and we'll sign off on this man taking them, and then you can just take them and go. I feel like, looking back on it, I feel like the police knew that he wasn't the best person for them to be going with, which we didn't find out till a lot later. But in that moment for me, but how everything went down, it solidified to me that they were supposed to be with us. Just because of how everything just kind of worked its way together. Like, had one thing gone differently, none of this would have happened. So, yeah, April 4th, 2018, we had a roommate at the time. We were basically like, hey, bud, you can stay here tonight, but you need to move out tomorrow because we need this bedroom for a couple kids. So they moved in, and they were wild children. At the time, 5-year-old girl decided to paint her bedroom. She got up at 7 a.m. and said, start painting her bedroom, because I was going to paint it. She was like, hey, I'll just do it. And so she got paint all over her clothes. It was great. So I went from, 6 months ago, no job, no college prospects, no kids, to now all of a sudden I have, I'm trying to go into accounting, and now I have 2 kids, but still no way to support them because I'm not, working. So they move in with us, and we start the process of trying to get legal guardianship of them, because once their mom was incarcerated, she actually signed a power of attorney form over to us. And we were talking with an attorney, and he was like, this is essentially worthless. Um, it allows you to do a couple of things from like a legal perspective, but at the time the girls needed like medical care, they needed dental care, they had all these different issues that like me as a just random babysitter can't sign off on. So my wife and I decided to take the step to contact an attorney, get a consultation, and see if we can get some sort of more tangible thing like legal guardianship. Which, if you've ever used an attorney, you know that they can be very expensive, and we're not in the best financial spot. So again, another step of faith of like, I did not want to do this, but I didn't realize it was going to be this big of a commitment. But I was like, again, my wife thinks this is a good idea. I trust her judgment. And this is the obvious logical next step. Like, this is what needs to be done. So this is what we're going to do. And, God will provide. So we start pursuing legal guardianship for them. We start getting like, threatening phone calls. We have people start stalking us, coming to our house, basically trying to deter us from doing this. But all the while we're just like, like, even though as terrible as this all feels, it feels wrong to go the other direction. There's something inside of us that was like, just kept kind of pushing us forward. So we pursued and won legal guardianship later that year. I believe it was 2018. And so then we were able to, I was able to put them on our insurance, which was helpful because, again, they needed a lot of medical and other types of attention. So we were able to start providing for them that way. And during that time, I had applied for an internship at Koch Industries, and I had gotten a call back to come and interview for the internship. And I was at home asleep. My wife and kids had gone to school, and I get woken up by a phone call, and I am in an hour-long interview in my pajamas that I crushed. That I still, to this day, don't know how I did it, because I am not a good conversationalist. And I'm definitely not a good interviewer, but I was able to be coherent 30 seconds after waking up and talk for an hour with, a recruiter. So I actually, like I said, I won an interview with that phone call, and I came in, and at Koch Industries, when they interview, they usually have multiple interviewers. So I was interviewed back to back to back by 3 different people. The entire process took about 2 hours. And again, not a good conversationalist, not a good interviewer, but I somehow crushed that interview. And I literally walked out, and I called my wife, and I said, Holy Spirit came and did an interview for me, because I have no idea how I did that. I was like, that was not me, because I was sitting there watching myself do a great job, because I have no idea what happened. And I still remember getting the phone call offering me the internship. And it was so exciting to share that news with my family, that my wife and the girls were sitting watching TV, and just being able to go and, tell them that I have a chance at something was a high point in my life. Yeah. So at this point, late 2018, there's hope, right? Like, I have an internship, and sadly, this internship is going to pay better than any job I've ever had up to this point. And, even though, it's still a few months away, I feel hope for the future, because it's like I can maybe do something for myself. I'm still in school. I'm paying legal fees now, but there's a bright spot in my future. Then in late 2018, maybe 2019, their mother actually gets out of jail August of 2018. The judge randomly reduced her sentence, and I think it was August of 2018. She called us. She called my wife. We were actually coming back from visiting my parents, and she called my wife and was like, I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. And my wife was like, well, like, do you like, we can take the baby. Like, if you want the baby, we can help you. Or if you want to, if you don't want the baby, you can, we can take it. She's like, that'd be great. And so suddenly we're going from, last year, no kids to 2 kids, now potentially 3 kids. And so we start, hopefully saving up and start planning, like, what's this going to look like? What's it going to look like to have a baby in the mess that is our life? And so we're planning for this baby to come along, and then their mom gets arrested again, goes to jail again. She's incarcerated for a while. She gets out, I think, maybe March of 2019. And around this time, she starts like using drugs heavily again, even while she's pregnant. And she called us, I want to say in April 2019, and was like, I don't want this baby anymore. I'm just going to abort it. Like, just get rid of it and move on with my life. And my wife was able to talk her out of it and be like we will take this baby. We want this baby. We love this baby. We'll take it. So then he is born May 31st, 2019. My family and I, we were on vacation in Tulsa. It was the first vacation we had taken as a family. We were on vacation, and their grandmother actually called my wife and said that he was born and that his lungs weren't working and that he had to be in the NICU on a respirator. And come to find out, it was because he was heavily addicted. He was addicted to heroin. He was heavily sedated, so he couldn't breathe on his own. And so that, and then coupled with just the way that their mom treated the baby, like basically didn't want him in the hospital. The nurses ended up contacting DCF, and DCF came and put him into foster care. And it was during that time that the police also came to our house because their mother had said that these other 2 girls, she had told DCF that we were babysitting them because she was going through a hard time. So the police came to our house and tried to take these girls out of our house until we were able to, produce the paperwork. We had guardianship, and the girls were, they interviewed them to make sure everything was going okay and that it was a safe place for them to live in. But then my wife, told the police, like, because this, they're part of like the DCF, like the family side, and she told these police, like, hey, like, what's going to happen to this baby? And they said, well, he's going to go into foster care. And Brooke said, well, we are working on getting our licensure. Can we, we would like to take him if that's possible. So we ended up on a list, and we had a social worker that was contacting us. And so what happened with that whole situation then was, for better or for worse, in the foster care network, the goal is always reintegration. So if a child is taken from the home, the goal is to bring the child back into the home. And their mother told the social worker that basically, like, if this child goes into the case home, I'm done. Like, I'm not gonna visit him. I'm not gonna try. And so in order to keep her engaged with the process, they put him in another home to try and help mom rehabilitate and eventually have him move back in. It did not go as they had hoped, but during that time, we started essentially engaging in a custody battle for him as well. because we felt like, you know, he was supposed to come and be with us. At that time, we had set up a nursery for him. We had everything ready. Our church threw my wife a, you know, baby shower with 24 hours notice. Got us everything we needed, like crib, diapers, clothes, everything. Only to, you know, find out he wasn't coming. And so we had engaged in this, you know, this legal battle of like, we don't believe that he's where he's supposed to be. And we feel like, you know, we feel again compelled to go down this path that, you know, we have no business going down, besides having, you know, this, you know, gut instinct or Holy Spirit, you know, nudge of like, hey, what's happening here isn't right. And, you know, you're, this is supposed to be your calling. This is supposed to be what you're supposed to be doing. So we didn't have anything that we really could do except for show up and pray. We would pray every night at the dinner table. Our girls would pray. Or every night, our girl will pray for, you know, baby brother to come home. And then, you know, my wife and I, we would go to every court hearing and, you know, sign up as an interested party just to, you know, show them that we were serious, show them that we were trying to be there. But we, you know, we really had no say in anything. And that court case progressed and actually ended up moving to termination. At that point, we started to try and get, you know, more of a footing in there of like, hey, we have his half sisters that are living in our house. You know, we're nearly licensed foster parents at this point. Like, we've been trying our best, and, you know, we just feel like financially, spiritually, all the way around, we are the best option for him. So we're fighting for custody of him. At the same time, because his rights were terminated, we also filed for adoption for the girls as well. And it was always nerve-wracking, you know, going to court, sitting. You can't bring any devices or electronics, since there's nothing to distract you from how awful the process is. So going there, I'd always get worked up and get sick, and it just never felt like anything was moving. Never felt like anything was going how I wanted to, which, you know, again, going back to 2017, riding my bike, it's like, why isn't this working the way it's supposed to, right? Like, why am I, like, God, you've got me spending thousands of dollars. I've got someone else's kids living in my house. Why isn't this going better? Like, I've done everything you know, it's like the Job experience, right? It's like, I've been doing all these things, and it feels like this shouldn't be happening this way. It feels like this should be so much easier, and it wasn't. And, you know, and then again, you know, the more you do legal things, the more expensive it is. And so the slower and harder things are, the more you spend. So I have that in the back of my mind too. And, you know, we're fighting, and there's this, it was 2 or 3 separate instances where it was like the judge moved for him to move into our house, and something happened the day of, and he wasn't allowed to come. So we had multiple, basically, false starts where it was like he was supposed to come move in with us and he didn't. And, you know, so again, it was like, that was probably the lowest point, was kind of towards the end of 2019 and into 2020, where it was like, we're spending all this money, we're wasting all of our energy and emotions on something that's not working. And, you know, a lot of times it was like, why are we doing this? Why'd you bring me out here to die? Like, why did God lead us all the way here just to, like, dead end, you know? There was that thought, but then, like, there's also the like the dichotomous thought of like God wouldn't bring us here to leave us here, right? So I think when we had nothing else, it was like that was what kept us going. When it was like God called us to this 2-3 years ago at this point. It was like God is going to finish like this good work, and he did. And it's looking back, the way that everything was orchestrated, you can see God's hand through all of it. Just the way that things happened, the way that there were things that were outside of the law, outside of procedure, outside of what should have happened, like what every precedent and case study would tell us that happened, that went in our favor when nothing else did. And I'll fast forward to summer of 2020, and we're going to all these different hearings, and every single time we would show up, they would announce our names, and our attorney, we had our attorney there, and they would announce our names, and the judge would ask who we were. So every single time we showed up, we have been here, we have gone to every single court hearing, and the judge had no idea who we were. And so it's not looking good. But, so DCF is advocating after rights are terminated. They're like, we want them to, handle the case home because like they have stable income. There's 2 parents. They have siblings. Like they have space for him. It's a good fit. But, the judge doesn't know who we are. And he's like, why would I put them in some random person's house? So we're doing all this stuff behind the scenes, and we're coming to the court case the day of, where the judge is going to decide and sign off on custody. And they recommend us, and he again is like, who are these people? And his clerk actually spoke up and was like, Judge, these are the people that have been here every single time. And I don't know how much you know about like court stuff, but like clerks aren't allowed to speak like at all. Like they're there to give the judge papers and take notes and stuff like that, but like they don't have any authority. But it was like that moment of like she spoke and basically brought us back into his vision, into like back into like, hey, this is an actual potential family. Yeah. So, sorry, that was the time before, but then we got up to the actual date of like, judge is going to sign off, and the docket kept getting delayed and delayed. And I think we waited for like an hour and a half. And I, again, I get really sick in anxious situations. So I feel terrible. And I'm, sitting there just basically trying to survive so I can go home and sleep. And the foster mother's attorney comes up and was basically like, the foster mother wants to talk to you guys. And so they find us like a side room, and I just remember her like sitting there looking at us and going like, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I love him, but I don't want to, waste all this time and energy like fighting you guys. And she basically in that room agreed to like, I'll let, like, as long as you guys promise me that I can visit him, like I'll let you guys have it. Which was huge because like this whole time we've just been battling, and obviously we agreed to it, and they took it before the judge and he signed off on it, and she came right over to our house after that, and she came and sat in our living room, and we talked to her for like 2 hours. And what I say is like compared notes of like what she was told by everybody versus what we know and what we've been told. And we found out that we had always been fed lies, like not from like any sort of establishment, but like their mother had been, weaving different stories for us and for her. And so like she just wanted what was best for him, and she thought that wasn't us. But yeah, like I said, she talked to us for 2 hours and then she left, and we have never heard from her again. Like, but our door is always open if she wants to come visit. Had she not done that, it could have lasted another 6 months to a year. And with as much as everybody was advocating for us, nothing was working. So it literally was like, you know, a move on her heart to like just be done. That was what saved us. And yeah, so then he moved in September of 2020, and because we won, his custody battle, we also basically got a big win in our attempt to adopt the girls. And then in January of 2021, we were able to adopt our girls, and then 2 months later, our son's process was finished too, and we legally adopted him as well. And during this whole time, I completed my internship. I got a full-time offer. I converted to being an analyst, and during the pandemic, actually. So I did it at home. I celebrated by myself. But I suddenly am like earning a salary, and I have medical benefits for the first time in my life. And, I'm able to have a savings. And one of the big, like, I'm an accountant, so money, anytime there's like money involved, it's always really exciting for me. But like one of the big God moments for me was like our CEO had this huge, like, not like a paradigm shift or like a mind change, but it was like he started seeing a lot of like these societal problems and was like, what can I do to people, like to empower people to attack some of these societal problems? One of those things was like, this was an HR benefit that they changed to cover adoption expenses, which it was a max of $20,000. You get a $10,000 reward per child of up to 2 children. So, in February of 2021, after I adopted the girls, like I was awarded $20,000 that I was able to use to pay off all of our legal expenses and actually have a savings for the first time in our life. But like, if nothing else, the fact that it was like that money came in and I was able to erase my debt that I had built up over the last 3-4 years, for me was God's way of saying, this is where you were supposed to be. This was what I was bringing you to. Like, I wasn't going to just leave you high and dry. Like, here's these kids, here's $20,000 in debt. Please, continue in my footsteps. It was, I've called you to this. I am the provider. I will provide what you need to get here and to, keep growing. So, every time I feel a nudge, or I feel like, like, why is God so quiet in my life right now? I think about like my kids and that story of like, when it felt like God wasn't doing stuff, when it felt like we were in the wrong place, like all we need was some hindsight, right? I can look back at all those times now and I can see where God was weaving himself into our life and where he was providing for us and protecting us. And, things that you couldn't see in the moment, but are very clear in hindsight.
What have you learned through this process, and how is your life different, or your walk with the Lord different now that you've walked in obedience in this area and he has proven himself to show up time and time again?
I believe that God equips us for the things that he calls us for, not necessarily to like crush it, right? Like not to be the best at it, but just to like do it, just whether like through your skills or talents or anything else, like he calls you to things that like your life has prepared you for, that along the way you've gained skills and experience that like you can apply to this. And, where those things don't apply, there's God's grace and his power, right? Like we had a lot of experiences where God stepped in and did stuff for us that we couldn't have done ourselves. So it's when I feel called to things and when God calls me into obedience in a certain thing, it's like, I know that with what life experience he has given me, plus his power, like anything is possible. And then the other side of it is that, God's not going to leave you high and dry. Like he's not going to call you into the desert. So any good work he starts, he will complete. It may not look like, the world's idea of success, but like he's going to make sure that you're cared for throughout the entire process.